Hey, what's going on, everybody? You're listening to Sane Show, the show about nothing and everything. I'm your host, Cliff, and today I have another special guest with us. She currently oversees production and creative development for the highly anticipated animated series Marvel's Spidey and His Amazing Friends. Other Disney Junior credits include the hit series Puppy Dog Pals, Tot, Goldie and Bear, and a popular Disney Junior Music Nursery Rhyme and Ready for Preschool short film series. Joining Disney in March of 2010, he has served as executive on live action Emmy Award-winning Imagination Movers. She also oversaw Disney Junior's Emmy Award-nominated interactive app Amigo, which premiered at #1 in the App Store. I have with us Lori, Vice President of Original Programming at Disney Junior. How are you doing, Lori?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. And thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come on Sane Show today. I'm super excited. I've been really looking forward to doing this recording with you. So thank you. I'm so happy to have you on.
Thanks.
So, really quick, before I introduce the topics, I want to take a moment to shout out all of our listeners in all 60 plus countries. Thank you guys. I love you guys. Thank you for continuing to like, share, subscribe, and spread the word about Sane Show. And if you're listening and you don't already follow us, be sure to check us out on Instagram and Twitter at sane_show. Again, that's sane, SANE_show. And then you can find us on Facebook. That's Sane Show. Again, on Facebook, that's Sane Show. All right. So today we're going to have a conversation about following the breadcrumbs, and then we're going to have a conversation about content and platform expansion. And then following those two topics, we're going to have an interview with you, Lori, so that listeners can learn more about you, the things you do, and all the fun and exciting things that go along with that. Cool?
Sure. You'll decide whether they're fun and exciting after.
All right, so let's go ahead and hop right into it with our first topic, follow the breadcrumbs. When you summed up your story when we've talked the last time, I found it to be very interesting when you said that you followed the breadcrumbs. And during the segment, I like to focus on that idea itself, what it means and how it can be beneficial. Because after the last conversation that you and I had, I really took and thought about it myself as far as during my career or certain points in my career, when did I do that? Did I do that? And thinking about it, of course I did, and I think others have as well. I think in hindsight, though, when we actually think about it, we realize that we did, right? Because we don't think about it when we're in the moment. I think for most of us, so I know I've certainly benefited from doing so, and overall, I think that we should all follow the breadcrumb trail at some point. So you just want to hand it over to you just so that you can just explain from your personal experience as well as far as what it means to follow the breadcrumb trail and things of that nature.
Okay, well, I think the reason I said that phrase was because I wasn't one of those people who had some kind of obvious talent or gift that I was given that was like, well, clearly you need to be an X. You're so fantastic at math, you must do this. So I never really had that thing that was driving me with its hand at my back, just sort of self-generated. I had a lot of things that interested me, but the way I grew up, the things that interested me seemed so you couldn't make a living at them. It's like, how do you make a living liking art or music, whatever I like, dancing or whatever. So, and I wasn't a fantastically academic kid. I knew I was bright, but it didn't really come out in my grades, and sort of the way we learned, I didn't do well at. In some ways, I mean, at the time I didn't think it was a gift, but in some ways it was a gift because the only thing I had left was kind of following either what I needed at the time or what I succeeded at. So, it was like, okay, well, I need a job. So, so who do I know? Who do I know? And I had been a DJ in college, and I played some piano, and my brother knew a guy who was a mixer, and so they lived in California. So I came out to California, and I met him, and then things just kind of, I followed where I thought I could get a job, and then I would hook on to some word or something that someone would say. It was like, oh, okay, post-production, mix it. This guy was a mixer, and someone would say post-production. So then when I would talk to people, I'd say, I want to be in post-production. And then they would tell me the next thing. And so that's what I was following. And I ended up in editing, and I ended up answering the phone at a place that did editing for commercials. But I kind of would listen and watch and was like, oh, they're figuring out like a puzzle. And I think the way my mind works is like that was perfect for me. It was like, oh, looking at these pieces and seeing how they fit together and what is the story. I think that I need a narrative in order to understand things, which is one of the reasons I wasn't good at the kind of learning that I had in school.
Mm-hmm.
But so that resonated with me. It's like, oh, creating narrative, beginning, middle, end, making things fit and make sense. So I followed that. And then it was like, okay, well, I really want to go to the dentist. So I need to get a job in the union. How do I get in the union? And then so
Mm-hmm.
that's, and it was just this sort of dance between what I liked, what I succeeded at and got positive reinforcement for, and what I needed. So that's what I
Right.
meant by following the breadcrumbs.
I think about it with mainly like with my career in sales, right? When I talk about that, I always tell people I didn't get into sales on purpose, right?
Uh-huh.
I came out of school, I took an internship because I needed a job, and I just okay this and then I wanted to like go into marketing, but I just had to began developing sales skills, and I'm like, okay, well, I had a job doing this and I can do this and I want to make this much. And then, I want to, and now like having moved up and eventually, because now I'm talking about transferable skills, figured that I could take those same skills and apply them to the business that I'm now in, as far as entertainment, right? How can I utilize that same skill set to make me successful over here? And that's something that we talk about a lot on the show, is the transferable skills. But just to go back and talking about following the breadcrumb trails when it comes to my path in sales and also even my path in the entertainment industry, it's a lot of that, right? Well, okay, I need this, but I'm able to do this, and how can I grow in this area? And just kind of went with it, right? Until I found
Mm-hmm.
that one, at least for myself, I found that one thing that works for me, or that I really wanted to do, and say, well, okay, I can do this. But go ahead.
Well, that's interesting, and it sort of brings up a question because I know that in my case, that it sounds a little like one of those books about follow your bliss or whatever, but there is that thing that the breadcrumbs in some ways are like, oh, this makes my heart sing a little bit. So that because it's not that it's easy because everything is hard work, but did you find that it was like, oh, this path doesn't have a million blockades between me and it? So that's an encouragement, sort of an internal encouragement of following those clues. Did you have that sense?
Yeah, and I think I really came to realize that when I started this podcasting, and like just because it wasn't that. It was just something that I wanted to do. Like I wanted to get back into radio, but then just not that it would have been a challenge, but just the process that I would have to go through. And I didn't want to do that. And honestly, like, I just wanted to do my own thing, which led me to where I am right now. And then this has taken me down a completely different path in which I thought I was going. So
But what is at the root of that? I mean, for me, it's like storytelling is the root of my joy. When I realize, kind of, when I distill it down, the homeopathic remedy of my joy is
yeah,
storytelling. So, what is at the center of your joy about, or your breadcrumb? What's at the center of it?
for me, at least when it comes to podcasting, it's great conversations,
Hmm.
and talking about great conversations with cool people, and talking about things of people of substance mainly,
Hmm.
and getting to hear other people's stories. So
Hmm.
I guess storytelling is a part of it. Growing up, my uncle told me that I was going to be that guy. I was going to be that one. I'm the storyteller of the family. 'Cause I
Hmm.
always
Right.
have a story to tell, whether it be my experience or someone else's story that I'm
Hmm.
sharing.
So, but conversation sounds a little bit more like what it's whatever that story is that happens within conversation for you.
Right, right. And I
Hmm.
mean, honestly, that's what I enjoy about the conversations too.
Hmm.
You get to meet different people, you get to learn about them. It's not just, selling something just for the sake of making a bonus or a commission. I really enjoy the interaction.
Right.
Have met a lot of awesome people doing that
Hmm.
kind of work. I just say that I guess in my breadcrumb, I've noticed that there is somewhat of a common thread in all that I've done, but
Hmm.
I haven't really realized that until I don't think up until this point in which you asked me that question that you asked. So thank you for that.
No problem. You've just saved yourself like 3 decades.
All right, we're back. Now we're going to have a conversation about content and platform expansion. So, again, when you and I last spoke, we talked about the expansion of streaming platforms, which also means more content, a lot more content. And the pandemic obviously accelerated this growth in the business, which spurred the growth in streaming subscriptions and the introduction of more content streaming platforms. And just from the research and the data that I looked at, I noticed that everyone's increasing their offerings. And one of the things I want to point out is, as far as everyone's using digital to attract a more diverse and younger audience, and examples, Gen Z and millennials. So there's a lot going on. It's an exciting time in the business as far as the growth of existing platforms, the introduction of new platforms, and there's going to be a lot more content, right? And everybody is looking to fill up with some great content, new content. And so, what are your thoughts around all of this when we talk about the industry and how, again, more platforms, more content, going digital, and all that kind of stuff?
Well, that is a huge topic, and I do think about it all the time. And
Hmm.
I I've been thinking and saying for probably a decade now that I felt like in some ways we're going to go all the way around the world and get back to where we started in a way, just because people have so many eyeballs and so many hours and so much money that they can spend on sort of intake of content, unless you're going to be just plugged in like that movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie Idiocracy, where you're just sitting in a chair and drinking your drink and watching the commercials on television. Like, there's a point at which it's sort of like, I need the time to live my life, I need the time to
Hmm.
make the money to subscribe to a service. So it feels to me like we're still in an expansion phase, and this is just me, just what I see. It feels like we're still in an expansion phase, and things are being gobbled up, things are being made, but there will be a point at which, and I don't think it's too far away, and we may have already hit it and just don't know it yet, that there's a saturation point where people are like, I can't make any more decisions, I can't spend more money, I can't. And then I think it will start, sort of sucking back in, and there will be probably 4 or 5 big players, and they'll be sort of akin to what networks were back in the day. They'll have a lot more content on them. People will view them differently, whether it means their screen or their ability to have a more kind of bespoke experience. I just don't see that we can just be in an ever expanding universe. I don't see how that's sustainable. So that's one part of it that I think about a lot. Another part that I think about is that I feel like there's going to be a point at which there will be some disruptors. I mean, right now, the streamers are sort of seen as the disruptors of the old guard, but I think there will be disruptors within that universe, and I'll be interested to see what they do, and whether it's sort of how people get things, like cracking the code for people to be able to sort of, I mean, I don't know about you, and I know that I'm older, and so there's this technological barrier for me, but so many times I'll like look and look and look and search and be like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'll just go watch an old Seinfeld, or I'll just watch, a murder mystery or something that makes me feel comfortable, because I'm like, should I watch this doc? Should I watch that series? Can I make a commitment to this thing or that thing? Should I go back to The Wire because I've never finished that and I always wanted to? And I just kind of get into decision numbness, and then I'm going to go like put on my comfy, the sort of IT version of comfy, pajamas, and just see something again I've seen before. So there's that. And then I also think about what happens in, like, I mean, I don't know that this is true. It was sort of anecdotal when I heard it, but one of the things that I've heard is that the way appointment television worked for the human brain was that it was like a serotonin release. Like, it was sort of like the long-term relationship. You'd wait every Thursday when that show came on, and you and your friends would have this shared experience, and you'd talk about it and blah, blah, blah. So that, and you fall in love with those things, and you have real affection for those things. And then, like, the way when you binge something, that's like not a serotonin hit, it's an oxytocin hit. So that means that, like, it's like that fantastic weekend. It's the one night stand kind of, wow, it was amazing and fantastic, but it's a memory. I don't go back to it a lot. I think about it fondly, but it doesn't live in my kind of long-term love vault. I can remember that I loved it, but I don't have that kind of deep affection for it. And lately, I've noticed that a lot of the shows that I am interested in drop once a week. So they're sort of going back to that model of titrating in slowly their show. So you build that affection, and so they don't burn through content so darn quickly, because it's expensive to make content. And that, again, is another, to me, signpost towards kind of a new way of doing an old thing. So that's a lot that I just said. Anyway.
No, that's true, and I agree. And I've even, I think either I talked about it with you or I've seen it somewhere where we like things that we are familiar with. Even, I appreciate the whole suggested, if you like this, you might like this. Oftentimes it doesn't work out like that for me.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
because when I'm looking for things to watch, I'm looking for what I know, like genres. So I'll say horror is a genre that is one of my favorites. So I'm going to go look for horror movies, right? I know when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to horror movies, I'm a big fan of paranormal. So I'm going to look for those kinds of movies. I know I'm a big fan of the Insidious and what's the other one? Annabelle. So I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
for things that are much closely aligned with those types of movies. And if it doesn't align, then I'm not going to watch it, right? Because I know I'm going to be easily disappointed, right? Especially if it's
Yeah.
cheesy, like the most recent one that I watched. As far it was
Which
Malignant.
shall be, oh, I was going
Go
to
ahead.
say, which shall remain nameless, but you said it. So.
Yeah, yeah, I was very disappointed, and it was a James Wan movie, and I know James Wan to be a very great director. So some people were joking that saying that he was just playing around with it, and I don't know. But either way, again, just going back to my point, a lot of people are like going to what's familiar, right? Even with some of the new content that I'm working on, it's stuff that is familiar, like
Mm-hmm.
based on things that inspired me were things that there was a common thread in between all the productions that inspired my latest piece of content. So
Right.
yes, I totally agree with that, and I do believe that this might be of, like you said, right, taking an old thing and or a new thing and doing it an old way or something like that.
An old thing and doing a new way. But in what you just said, I think is in some ways kind of the problem, for lack of a better phrase, because you're basically, to me, it's like you're getting into a tighter and tighter circle, because your algorithm that they're feeding you stuff with, whether it's information on the internet or the programming, I mean, I watched a show that the protagonist was overweight, and then every freaking thing that showed up of you might like this was with some fat lady who, it's like, oh, okay. And it was like, I mean, it wasn't like I hated or I didn't hate it. And it's like, okay, I watched something that resonated for me. And so you think that overweight women are the thing that I liked, but that wasn't why I was attracted to that. I was attracted to the humor of that art, of that talent, and the smartness of that talent, not her weight. And so suddenly I was in some bucket. And then I feel like that's what happens to everybody. And I mean, again, dating myself, but I was just talking about this with some friends and my husband last night, that when everybody was sort of watching the same thing, your eyes were, or we were talking about it in terms of music, like you would be listening to top 40 radio or top 100 radio and hear everything from like the cast of a Broadway play to a rock band to Frank Sinatra and and I was hearing it, and I was getting turned on to things that I didn't listen to normally or that weren't in my generation or culture. and so was everybody else. And so you were sort of cross-pollinating in a way that I feel like you don't get to do as much as both creators and consumers, because you're just
Okay.
getting a tighter and tighter circle.
Okay. How about this then? On the vendor side of it, what are your, because now I'm thinking companies that are producing the content, and the whole idea of rinse and repeat. We know what works, what formula, especially when we think about sitcoms. There's this formula.
Yeah. Oh,
I think
but do we? How many failed sit? Oh, but do we? How many failed sitcoms are there? And they follow that same formula. I
that is true.
believe I work at the right company because I believe in magic. I
Yeah.
believe that you can't make everything into zeros and ones. There's something, and maybe that's a fool's thought, but it's my story and I'm sticking to it. I
No,
like
I agree.
magic.
And I'll say this. I'm a big fan of the Entourage series on HBO, and there's talks about a reboot. I would love to see the show be rebooted, but at the same time, and I read an article that did address this, is okay, Adrian Griner, who played Vincent Chase, is not young anymore. And
Right.
everybody,
Hmm.
like, is that same formula going to work for the reboot? And that's what everybody needs to think about. And maybe, okay, can we bring him back? Yes, we can. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say the only person that can probably fill the same role as Jeremy Piven as Ari Gold, but as going back and being an agent. But there needs to be another young star coming in, and maybe the show can focus around a younger Hollywood star coming
Hmm.
up in today's Hollywood versus trying to navigate the life of somebody who's had their time to shine. And I mean, really, when you think about and this is with any show, when you think about the original format of it and the whole basis of it, that's what made some of these great productions what they were. So go ahead.
Right. Well, again, the magic of what happened, like those ingredients somehow just really sang together. And when you try to kind of, it's kind of when when you hear people say, well, I want to make a viral video. It's like you can't make a viral video. You make a video and then it goes viral.
Mm.
So it's like that can't be your intent, is to like recreate something that was magic. I mean, I hate to keep saying magic, but that was sort of the
Hmm.
whatever that X factor was, made it work. But I do see that, we have been pretty much the same story since we've been telling stories around the fire. And so they resonate in, to the human brain or the human heart in some way. So, yeah, like maybe it's Entourage, but not Entourage. What is it about Entourage that worked? And what wouldn't work now? And I think you hit some of it, is like there is the striving of being a certain age, or the innocence or the guilelessness or the foolishness of being a certain age that doesn't wear well if you're a middle-aged person. Phoebe on Friends as a ditzy 20 something, well, she was playing a ditzy 20 something, is fine. A ditzy 50 something seems like she might be having early onset, Alzheimer's. It just doesn't
Right.
work. So
Yeah.
so I think, like, what's at the core of the story that resonated, and then what is inspiring about the now that makes you make a new version of that.
I also want to add the people, because Jeremy Piven did a great job as Ari Gold. You have Jerry Seinfeld, who nailed it in his role. Because whatever Jerry does, it works. Whether it's Seinfeld, comedians in cars, his stand up, that's another factor too, right? The talent, especially if they're charismatic. I don't think we give. I guess when I think about the general population, I don't think they take into account charisma as much as they should, because if you have the right, not just the right person, but that if that person has the right, if it's just in their essence, this is something I talked about on the last episode. I think that goes a long way, because we see that in some of the top people in Hollywood, as well as Dwayne Johnson and other Hollywood heavyweights who just have the personality that could carry almost anything.
Well, that's interesting that you say that. I think that that's true. I mean, there are those people who you feel like, oh, when they're in the room, all the energy seems to just flow to them. We don't know why. It's probably, some mathematical combination of their features or something that all of us kind of go, perfect thirds or whatever. But I also think that some, like when you talk about Jerry Seinfeld, and I don't know what his inner workings are, but he seems to be a guy who knows what he's good at and what he's not. You know what I mean? He seems to have
Oh
had
yeah.
the talent to be like, I'm not going to do that thing because that thing is not me. This is the lane where I shine. And there are some people, I mean, I've always wished to be one of those people that had sort of a preternatural understanding of themselves or seemed like they had a preternatural understanding of themselves and had some grace around that. But some of those people that you talk about having charisma, it seems like they have some sort of knowledge, like self knowledge. They know how to follow the light a little bit more easily.
All right, we're back now for the interview. So we're going to learn a little bit more about you, Lori, so that the listeners can learn more about you and the things that you do and all the exciting things that go along with that. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question, you mentioned that times are different from when you were coming up in the business, mentioning that you could afford to fail and take chances. How is the business different now?
Partially, it's just how the world is different now. You could be and say and do pretty stupid things, and not a lot of people would know about it. And now you post everything you do. And if you make a misstep, that's it for you. It's there forever. And it kind of freezes people in time because, the 18-year-old Cliff would not be saying the same thing as the 30-year-old Cliff will or the 40-year-old Cliff will, but that's all still you out there and you are accountable to it. So there's that piece of just being able to kind of shed your past in a way and your past missteps in a way that I don't think people now really have that luxury. Of course, they eschew the internet, which I don't think is possible to do anymore. So, um, and I don't recommend it. I'm just saying, I think that I think you have to kind of be a very responsible curator. And I think that's hard to know when you're young. So there's that. And so I had that going for me. But I also think you could take chances a bit more because the environment, whether it's true or not, the sense of the environment is that you are just in this race and you have to be a thoroughbred. I have to say that I think the biggest thing I had going for me when I started out was that I hadn't gone because was answering phones or a driver for some film company was really a frustrated director having to do all this garbage before they got to direct their film. And for me, I was like, I get to staple scripts. This is amazing. Like I was just, everything was this new, exciting, like I'm in this world with these people. And I think for the people around me that were not feeling like I was breathing down their necks trying to, do what they were doing, that was probably good. And it gave me some room to learn because I wasn't so particularly, it wasn't like I was without ambition, but I was not particularly like, I want that thing over there. I was just kind of, again, just going like, that's really interesting. What do you mean by that? What's color correction? What's an internet? Like I would just be kind of, I was in film school. So, and I could suck at things and without a lot of, it wasn't like, here's $200 million because you made a really good student film and go make a big movie for some big studio. And if you blow it, that's it for you. I was not that. So, and most people were not that. So even people who were self-directed had a little time to grow. And I feel like, that the fact that this is a voracious monster, this kind of, immediate access. And so people aren't, if you have a talent or if you have something that you put out there, it gets gobbled up and then what's next? What's next? What's next? And you don't have a lot of time to kind of sit, I think, and figure out what did I do well? What didn't I do well? What was good? What was bad? You know, and I think all of that, it makes it difficult. It makes it difficult.
So my next question, while you followed the breadcrumbs, at what point in your career did you become intentional about the direction you wanted your career to go in?
It wasn't a moment. It was moments. I became directional when it was like this thing. That's oh, that's what I want to do. I'll go after that. And then I did that thing, and it was like, okay. Well, now that I did that thing, I kind of see what that person's doing over there, and that's interesting to me. Let me go over there. I think just generally intentional for my life. I probably am more intentional now because I know, I really do know that the hand of time is at my back, and you don't unfortunately really get a sense of that until you're in the last third of your life. And then you just realize, like, I better be intentional because I am literally spending my time at this point. And how do I want to spend it? And I need to be, I can't flail around, while the calendar pages fly off. I need to be intentional about what the relationships I want to have, and the art I want to make, and the conversations I want to have, and the people I want to love, and how I want to love them, and how I want to love myself. Like, all those things are becoming much more center stage.
Understood. So you mentioned that you love animation. You also mentioned how
Mm.
impactful it is on younger viewers. Given the current environment where parents are on high alert about content their children are consuming, how do you, as a parent and professional in the business, take parental concerns into account?
Our company does, and there are things in place that are, kind of institutional things in place, like an educational research group and school studies and things that are, and learning about the latest academic discoveries about development, kids in the world, and what things matter to kids, and what are they stressing about, and what are they worried about. And that's what the institution does, and I benefit from that greatly. Personally, the woman who hired me said to me, because I had not been in preschool before, and she said to me, when you had a 4-year-old, would you want that coming out of their mouth? And if you don't, probably you don't want them to be watching it. And I thought that that was a perfect guidepost. Like, even if you're modeling that as the quote unquote baddie, the villain, you try to sort of keep them within a framework that kids understand. Like, no, you're not to say those things. You are not to treat someone that way. You are not to be that way in the world. And I think that that's my personal signpost. And also just being informed by, I mean, certainly where we are right now societally, it's a total constant self-check of why, why is this character saying this and not that character? Why does this character always ask questions while this character always makes statements? Are we doing that because of their gender, because of their color, because of, because of their age? So I feel like I'm always running those questions through my mind now, just because I'm in the process, and we're in the process as a culture. And that's certainly another way to think about how you're impacting viewers,
Yeah,
because
that's a great question as
you're
far as
essentially,
would
you're
you want
essentially
that
giving them
coming out of your
reality.
kids' mouth or those
Hmm.
kinds of things. Yeah, that was spot on.
Hmm. Yeah, that's sort of an easy trick to ask yourself when you're working in preschool.
Right. All right. And my last question to you: going digital eliminates barriers of entry for creatives. How do you feel this will impact creatives and their ability to make it onto major platforms?
I wish I could say that I believe that it would change things a lot, which is what I'm hoping for. When the question you asked before about, like, my answer was like the disruptors. I'm interested about what the disruptors would do, but I feel like what's happening is, like, instead of trolling the clubs and the small publications, they're trolling TikTok. People who are looking for mining talent are, sometimes trolling TikTok, or, they're just sort of, again, the platform has changed where you find folk. But I do think, original talent will always find a way. So even if things are kind of codified and become carbon copies of the next thing and the next thing, there will always be artists that want to do something in a unique way, or tell a story in a different way, or need to show something that is not the way everybody's shown it before, even though, it can, obviously, if it resonates with people, there's some commonality about it. But I think original creation will find its way. It will seep through somehow. And I think that the digital platforms allow that to happen. But like anything else, there's the dark side, and then there's the light side. So everything can come through, but hopefully a lot of art can come through in that. I do think that it's probably not a very, it's probably, I don't know if this is okay to say, but I think that, if you're not regulating what people see, if you're not just giving people what they already want to see, that's a big help in allowing that to happen. because I think creative minds are sparked a lot by input. And if your input is come down to some algorithm that keeps feeding you the same thing, it's really hard to think outside of that box. I would hope that we find ways to have inputs that come from a lot of different places in every way, not just from a lot of different places of like how people grew up or what culture they come from or anything like that, but also from just, strange minds. Strange minds do think great things. And I want them to find a way to infect the rest of us. So,
I agree. I certainly agree on that one, especially when you talk about creatives or, well, everyone in general, just keeping an open mind and not just sticking to the algorithm. So definitely have a point there. But that's all of my questions. Lori,
mhm.
thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to come on Sane Show. Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed having you on the show as well. Definitely going to have you back on again in the future. So thank you again for taking time to come on Sane Show today.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It was really delightful. Thanks.
Awesome. So yes, thank you again, listeners, for continuing to like, share, subscribe. Uh, make sure you are. I mean, we're all supporting Disney in some form of way. So let's keep consuming that great content that they're putting out. So again, you guys are listening to Sing Show, a show about nothing and everything. And until next time, we're out.